If you've played Battlefield 5 since patch 5.2 released, I want to do a vote that anyone watching this video can participate in. Consider this, based on your experience playing the game so far with the new damage values. Leave a like if you like how the game feels now, and leave a dislike if you don't like how it feels now. Simple, done. Good, let's discuss. So earlier this week, patch 5.2 released, and with it came a ton of bug fixes, new features, and also sweeping changes to the meta of the game affecting bullet damage and introducing passive spotting. The bullet damage tweaks have changed how the game feels. You now need more bullets to eliminate enemies, especially at medium and long ranges. Weapons are no longer as lethal as they once were. The passive spotting has introduced a new system whereby enemies that are close to you and within your cone of vision will automatically have red dots or indicators above their heads even if they're not spotted. You don't have to be looking at them directly either for this to occur. My opinion of these two particular elements in short is that they are not positive changes for the game, and I don't think Battlefield 5 needed this. I liked how fast the time to kill was, and introducing passive spotting elements that show you where enemies are without the player having to look or listen devalue the tactical appeal and overall feel of the game. The minimap now even shows you the direction that enemies are facing. These changes have also come too late in the life of the game. Active players of Battlefield 5 obviously played the game because they enjoyed the thing that you spent the most time doing, shooting. They've got used to how that feels and plays over the last 13 months, and that's why they've invested time and money into it. With the latest patch, that all goes out the window. In terms of weapon balance, it appears that the goal of this was to solidify each weapon type into its own sweet spot damage range, and on certain weapons it has achieved that goal. Assault rifles like the STG-44 and Ribby, for example, still feel pretty strong to me, and I quite like how they feel and haven't noticed much of a difference. The same for something like the Type 100 SMG at close and medium ranges, it still rips people. The Lewis gun for support is quite decent. However, plenty of other guns in the game are now inconsequential and irrelevant, feeling like they take way too many bullets to kill targets at medium ranges. The M1907, FG42 and the MG42 are good examples of this. There is a big disconnect now between how the gun looks like it should perform, what your experiences and expectations are, and what it can actually achieve. Long-range gameplay outside of the bolt-action rifles, which weren't changed, is now unrewarding and heavily discouraged. DICE want you to close the gap, that's obvious, but the problem with this is that Battlefield maps are big, and taking out people at longer ranges is satisfying. Not anymore. That element of the game has gone. Since the patch, if I see targets at long ranges, I start to engage them, I notice the small amount of damage that I'm hitting them for, and I just tend to move on. And you have to consider what hasn't changed. You're still engaging here with soft, unarmored human targets. So it's obvious that if DICE want to stick with this new damage model, more care and attention has to be paid to certain weapons that just don't make sense statistically anymore. As for passive spotting, I think it's one of the worst additions to the game so far. It 100% makes the game easier, and it punishes players who want to take advantage of stealthy play, removing that tactical option. Since the patch gameplay is a sea of red markers for your team and the enemy team. And I thought that we'd moved away from this. When you throw the spam of spotting flares into the mix, and most of the time, especially on game modes like Breakthrough or Frontlines where there's only one or two objectives in play at a time, you are either spotted or passively spotted. This is terrible for intelligent gameplay options and player satisfaction. One of the key pillars of the design of Battlefield 5, based on what we've heard developers at DICE say, is that they didn't want people to play the user interface. But now, look at it. That's exactly what we're doing. There's plenty of bugs with this too, where it's occurring through smoke, through walls, and instances where it shouldn't be triggered, but it is. It's a feature that's not ready.
Look at this! Why can I see them? Does anybody not think that's mad?
So you have to ask yourself, why were these things done? What was the purpose of these massive changes, and what are the possible side effects? Before we get into that though, ask yourself, what was your perceived sentiment of the game over the last couple of months? For me personally, since the start of October and throughout November with the release of Operation Underground and the new Pacific maps, I've really been enjoying my time playing the game. When Underground released, I remember looking at the server list and just smiling, seeing the amount of full servers, people in the queue. And then with the Pacific, two gorgeous maps, the best breakthrough experience, US, Japan, flamethrowers, Sherman tanks, katanas, BF5 began to feel and look like a fun, sandbox Battlefield game. The amount of positivity that I saw online from the players, on social media, in YouTube comments, reviews from the press, people I know personally who had stopped playing the game after launch and didn't enjoy it, actually came back and were now just hardcoring the Pacific playlist. So I thought to myself, great, we know we've got Wake Island coming up too, private games on the horizon, and the core gameplay is where it needs to be now. BF5 has found its identity and the current player base are undeniably enjoying this. To grow from that point and succeed is adding more of those well-known World War II battles, Eastern Front, US in France, more North Africa, maybe more Pacific, and fixing bugs and adding cool new cosmetics, animations, weapons, gadgets, experimenting with more new game modes like Outpost and grow the scope of the game in year 2. That's the way forward. Instead, we've had patch 5.2, which changes the core gunplay and spotting considerably. And this brings me back to why. Why has this happened? There must be some solid reasoning for DICE to do this considering the positive sentiment of the community. From my perspective, I'm an active current player of the game who lives and breathes Battlefield. I personally wasn't seeing or feeling much negativity about time to kill or spotting, and changing those goes against the wishes of the current player base. It doesn't make much sense. So why then? Why do you think this has happened? Well, I think there's a couple of potential reasons, and I'm not saying these are 100% right, I don't know this for sure, and I am just making my best guesses. In terms of gunplay, it could be seen as an attempt to rebalance things, make more guns viable, change up the meta a bit. Has it achieved that goal? For some weapons, yes. For most of them, no. And it has eradicated long-range gunplay unless you're using a sniper rifle. Another potential reason, and I think this is the truth based on my knowledge of gaming and business, this has been done in an honest attempt to make the game more accessible and retain new players. But I don't think it will work in its current form. It's a big mistake. And all it's achieved so far is to annoy the current vocal player base who are being very outspoken about it. The whole thing is unnecessary, and the writing on the wall was there a year ago when this happened the first time. It baffles me that it's happened again. It's caught the attention of some ex-DICE devs too. Indigoed here used to work at DICE LA and had this to say: I wish I still had access to the data showing retention and churn of players in BF5. The 5.2 TTK update is almost certainly an attempt to make those KPIs perform better. If we see a revert in January, February, March, the data probably looks worse in 5.2. If changes are kept, it worked. So what does that mean then? There's a couple of businessy phrases in there. My understanding of it, retention, that's the continued use of someone playing the game. Churn in this capacity means when an existing player or any kind of return player stops playing the game and doesn't come back to it. And KPI stands for Key Performance Indicator, a measurable value of how effective a business is in achieving certain objectives. He's saying that in his opinion, the 5.2 TTK changes are perhaps designed to increase retention, keep people playing for longer, and reduce churn, which means less players leaving the game and never logging back in again. If people are playing for longer and not leaving, they become more invested and are more likely to spend money on cosmetics and support the business of DICE and continued development of the game and the growth of the Battlefield franchise. In some respects, DICE obviously think that these changes will help. Why? Well, my assumption is because they think these changes will make the game easier and more accessible. How? Well, let's look at those first. Longer time to kill means that you take longer to die. Dying is annoying. If you die over and over again, it might cause you to close the game and never log back in. You didn't enjoy it. But with a longer time to kill and lower bullet damage, this means that you've got longer to react and fire back, get in cover, more survivable, which ultimately means that you're dying less and not as quickly. The passive spotting system, well, I think that's been introduced as a crutch for new players, so enemies are easier to spot and the game is more readable. You will automatically be told now who the bad guys are and where they're shooting at you from if you're close enough. If what I've just talked about is true, I don't think the gameplay changes that have been implemented in patch 5.2 will achieve that objective. If this really is about player retention and getting new players in, then there are many other factors about the game that turn people off in the first place and stopped them from playing. For example, a lack of robust tutorials, performance problems, stuttering, bugs, a decent team balancer, cheaters on PC, no community servers yet, and the fact that for whatever reason it took 6 months before a new map was released in a live service game. Wrapping things up, I thought the gunplay and time to kill was good. I thought the lack of automatic spotting was fine, and I'm looking forward to the new Operation Sandbox style maps. What's worse about this for me is that I felt that no one in the majority currently playing the game has asked for these changes, and the game was on the way up again. Positivity was high, the marketing has been way better with the trailers recently too, and getting new players in would be easy if you add that classic World War II content that we talked about. Flesh out the live service. And some other things you could do are more free trial weekends. You could advertise EA Access and Origin Access way more than you do, spending less time in menus and more time in game, changing the spawn flow, having a better kill cam so players understand where they got killed from, how much damage they took and where from. Even something, if it's possible, like adding cross-platform support. But changing the core gameplay, which people love, was not the right answer for me. The 5.2 gunplay and passive spotting, in my opinion, are dumbing the game down and going against its original design principles, which we've been playing with since release. We are now playing the user interface and being less attentive, using our eyes, ears and brains less. It's not as satisfying, and it removes gameplay opportunities that could be had before. We're now forced to play at close and medium ranges on huge maps, and some guns just don't make sense anymore. And think about this too, what's the most popular first-person shooter at the moment? Call of Duty Modern Warfare, and it feels like that has a quicker time to kill than Battlefield did before this patch. Do I think DICE will revert these changes completely? No, it's their game. They call the shots, they've done this because they felt it was the right thing for the game. Do I think they will look at these changes in more detail and fix the oversights that have been made here? I hope so. Some guns just don't make sense anymore, and it's glaringly obvious that more thought and testing should have gone into this before it released, and really all it's done is sow seeds of distrust within the fans of DICE and the player base. BF5 ultimately is a bit of a roller coaster. One good thing though is that they've said that they are meeting on Monday to discuss feedback about this and figure out where to go with it next. Also, there was a live stream last week before this patch had even come out, where David Serlin said that internally they're testing a build that removes some of the TTK changes and keeps the ranged stuff. Whatever that means, it was a bit unclear, but it just feels like it's all over the shop at the moment. DICE keep moving the goalposts, and it's really not good for the game or the player base. Also, most of the stuff in patch 5.2 was a win, in my opinion. I love that tanks are more viable now if you play with them intelligently. I like the changes to the AP mines, and there's been some good other quality of life fixes. But of course, that stuff, and arguably the release of Wake Island next week, has been overshadowed by this. With that said, thank you for watching. It'll be interesting to see how this all unfolds. Let me know your thoughts down below, and I'll see you in the next one.